Today I'm going to talk to you about the economic state of the meatpacking industry. I chose this industry because I have lots of family who are involved in the production of beef and pork, so I thought it would be very fitting if I delved a little bit more into it. So, quick overview, the meatpacking industry is highly industrialized. It's very successful within the United States. There's a large demand for meat of lots of varieties, both in the United States and growing globally. And also, it's not a very competitively diverse industry as it stands right now. There's not a lot of companies in the United States that have equal market share, market value. There's very few at the very top, and also around the world, there's very few that can compete at the level that the United States competes at globally. So a quick history and kind of overview of where this industry has come from. The meatpacking industry gained a lot of growth in the late 1800s at the start of the Industrial Revolution, and that led into the early 1900s as well. There is a rising immigration rate, which created a large amount of mouths to feed, as well as a large number of jobs available within the industry, with very limited government regulation at the start of this industry, especially at this time period. There is a lot of companies that pulled together quickly to create a trust and a monopoly-style market. However, this was kind of broken apart when Teddy Roosevelt came into office. There was a journalist at the time, Upton Sinclair, who wrote a book called The Jungle, exposing more or less just the difficult conditions of working within the meatpacking industry, sanitary issues, and also some of the issues that were facing employees with low pay. So this led to Teddy Roosevelt passing the Meat Inspection Act of 1906, and also led to further muckraking of big business at this time, a little bit more government intervention and regulation to kind of bust apart monopolies and trusts. This busting apart led to a time where there was a lot more competition within the market, and that kind of carried up through the 1970s and 1980s, especially as we moved across the United States into more local meat lockers within smaller communities. However, as we stand now, there are currently 4 big companies within the United States that make up the majority of the market share, 80% of it, being Cargill, Tyson, JBS, and Smithfield Meats. So this presents more of an oligopoly structure of an industry. So as we get going here, we'll delve into the supply and demand of the industry, as well as the overall cost of production, the analysis of that, as well as competition facing the industry. So as we start with supply and demand, America is a perfect country for the ability to raise livestock. There's large amounts of land available, lots of readily available feed with all of the farming and agriculture that takes place, and this has led to not only the production of a lot of animals, a lot of livestock and cattle, but also the production of large-sized animals, livestock, and cattle. The average size of a gutted carcass of a U.S. beef weighs about 772 pounds, while the average size for the exact same thing in China is about 331 pounds. So not only are there more cattle in the United States, but there's also larger cattle. This meat processing scene within the United States is becoming even more efficient as well. There's less meat lost due to sanitation, and the assembly line style processing just leads to very quick production. So supply is very much made available quickly. The domestic demand for meat is also extremely high. If you look over to the right here, you can see that the consumption of meat within the United States is extremely high. This is a graph of all chicken, beef, and pork. You can notice the rise over the course of the years from 2017 to where we're at now, or 2012 to where we're at now in 2017. 70% of the United States population is vegetarian or vegan. So there's the majority of people that are consuming proteins are consuming them from the animal source, which allows for even larger demand. With all of the production that we talked about earlier, and the demand being met within the United States, this also creates a very much overseas shipment, which leads to even more profitability for companies within the United States. As we break down here, you can see the percent or the numbers of animals that have been butchered and processed within industry in 2013. Uh, Obviously, chickens need to be butchered at a higher rate since a chicken is smaller than other animals to have readily available amount of meat. This is kind of what needs to take place. And actually, trends have shifted to where even more chickens are being butchered because of the the increase in demand for chicken. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. This is the types of meats that are being produced in total pounds within the same year of 2013. You can see chicken is being produced at a pretty high rate, followed closely by, or followed a decent amount by beef, than some other varieties. Also looking here, this gives us a little bit more um, insight on the supply and demand of regionally where these animals are being butchered at. If you notice, most of these animals are with the central United States, kind of in the Midwest. However, you do see that chickens are being butchered more on the southeast part of the country, and I think a lot of that is due to the large amount of concentration of chicken farms within that area. So obviously there's a lot of cattle that are farmed in the central part of the United States. And Iowa is known as the pork capital of the country. So it goes to show that they're being butchered and processed close to their place of being raised as well, and chickens as well in the south. So as we talked earlier a little bit about the fluid demand of this industry, uh, there is a shift towards the direction of lower cost within the industry. The demand will tend to gravitate towards something that is a little bit cheaper. Um, since beef has become a little bit more expensive as of late, chicken has increased in demand due to its lower cost. Um, so an increase in demand will create a higher price, and this is also happening in overseas market. With the United States doing so well in the meatpacking industry, there have been more places that have desired to have their animals um, processed and then shipped out to overseas locations to increase their profits. Additionally, beef prices have gone up 250% since 2008, but that's only 50% since 2012. So the increase in chicken demand, since chicken's been cheaper, has led to a tapering off of beef increase in price because the poultry demand has gone up that much more. And I would expect to see that the poultry price will actually continue to rise as we move forward here in the next few years until things kind of even out. It's also kind of interesting having an uncle who runs a feedlot in northeast Nebraska to see that these prices are going up that much since 2008. Just even in conversation with him, that he has not seen an increase in the price that he is receiving um, that is kept up in a steady rate. So it's going to show that these meatpacking plants are able to generate a pretty large profit off of the packing process alone, and they're not paying any more for cattle. So talking about supply and demand, looking at the production a little bit, the process of production goes to show that there's an increase in production within the meatpacking industry, has increased the amount of migrant workers we've had, and increase in minority populations in the United States, especially within the Midwest. There's been a lot more factories that have opened up in small towns around the Midwest, and that has led to immigration to rise. These immigrant workers actually tend to consume a higher amount of meat consumption in comparison to other populations within the United States. Hispanics outpace the minorities in most varieties of meat consumption except for seafood, which is led by an Asian population. However, with the new governmental agenda, with a new presidential administration entering office, it will be interesting to see if this has any effect on the minority population and who's employed within these factories, within these plants. Um, there's a very good reason why these companies are hiring migrant workers in order to keep production costs low, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But it will be interesting to see if immigration laws and reform have anything to do with the ability for these companies to employ these workers. So, as I had just mentioned, we'll talk a little bit more about the production cost analysis here. It used to be very much an urban job, um, high pay, high wages given out. If you are any bit of a movie fan from the 70s and the 80s, um, in the movie Rocky, uh, his brother-in-law Paulie was actually a meat packer in Philadelphia and earned a pretty darn good wage doing that. So history has shown that there used to be a little bit more of a wage difference between what meat packers are making back then compared to now. However, as the plants have transitioned to rural areas with immigrant labor, the pay has decreased, and this has helped keep the cost of production low, making this a very profitable market for people who are at the top of the food chain of the industry. The other interesting thing to look at is the sustainable energy that is being used in the meatpacking industry to keep production costs low. Um, the reuse of water, that the cleanliness of the water, the sanitation, to be more energy efficient, has definitely helped their ability to remain sustainable. Also, steam cooking of meats has led to a decrease in cost as well as an increased shelf life for goods that are being produced in these factories, which has also helped make products a little bit more marketable. Overall competition, we talked about this at the beginning, there are the big four that make up 80% of the market share. However, there's a lot of other smaller popular companies that still do make a pretty decent wage within the overall competition in the industry. Some very popular ones, especially in this region, would be Hormel, Conagra, and Oscar Mayer, ones that we're all familiar with. There's a Hormel packing plant close to where I grew up. There's a Conagra plant in Omaha, Nebraska. There's actually a Smithfield Beats factory in northwest Iowa as well. So these are all kind of regional, especially in the Midwest. But those smaller names might be a little bit different than they are in the Foster Farms and Singerson Farms. I believe are a little more southern location. With that being said, the 80% market share, it's not a true oligopoly, but I would call it a near oligopoly. There's a considerable amount of consideration that must take place between firms before they make decisions. For example, Tyson must consider Smithfield's pricing in order to remain competitive and sustainable within the market. Firms are interdependent with one another. Those big four firms are interdependent. However, there are enough options to provide some source of competition outside of the big four when it comes to pricing options for consumers. So in conclusion, you can see that the meatpacking industry is very well established within the United States. There's a high demand for meat both locally and globally, and the high supply keeps that very much well fed. That demand is met easily. There's also a fluid demand that fluctuates between products. The amount of immigration within the United States has allowed for the ability to maintain a low cost of production as well as maintain the supply within the industry, and the continual innovations within the industry allow for production costs to be kept low as well. A high market concentration at the top within four big companies makes it a little bit more of an oligopoly with some competition that is noteworthy. But overall, we expect to see continued growth within this industry. The demand for meat within the United States is not going anywhere. And with the success that these businesses are having overseas, it's definitely clear to see that the amount of shipping out of resources will continue to remain high, sending our meat to other countries around the world. These are my sources. I look forward to reading your guys' comments and opening up a little dialogue as we are able to look at